Good afternoon, everyone. And today we are on Hebrews lesson 3, basically looking at the end of chapter 6. I have to let Yvonne back in. She seems to be having trouble, so we'll do that. Hebrews chapter 6. A lot of it is about Abraham. So most of what we studied was understanding why the writer of Hebrews used Abraham as an example for these Jewish Christians. So I want to just back up and review again and try to like step back and get the big picture about these Christians, these believers he's writing to, because from this point on, we're going to move into the priesthood, Melchizedek and the priesthood and the temple and all of that. So before we leave and go into that, I want to just really, again, understand who these people are that he's writing to and why he would be saying some of the things that he's saying. So we remember that he's writing to Jewish believers, correct?
Yes.
Jewish believers, all right. And this letter is an exhortation to them. What is the exhortation primarily about?
Holding steadfast to the faith.
Okay.
To Jesus.
And the superiority of Jesus to the Old Covenant.
Right, right. So why is that significant that he would exhort them about Jesus? These people in particular. Okay.
Because they were in danger of falling away, returning back to, they'd be pressured too to return back to Judaism,
Right.
the Old Testament and the law and all of that.
Right. So what we have to remember that this book, in fact, look at your at a glance on page 7 and chapter 1. When we first started this study, I remember saying that chapter 1, verses 1 and 2 create the foundation of this book. Chapter 1, verses 1 and 2, when he says, in the past, God spoke through the prophets, spoke to our fathers through the prophets, but now he speaks through Jesus. So this is that shift where all of these Jewish believers were raised under the law for generations, and then Jesus came, and now he's saying, and now they have accepted Jesus, but now there's some struggles. And so what he's saying to them is, he's exhorting them, encouraging them about who Jesus is, why they should hold fast, why they should continue in that belief in Jesus and not go back to the law. Remember, we talked, I think maybe last week, about the law being dead works. So if it's dead works and you go back to the law, what are you going back to?
Dead works.
Dead works. They can't save you. What you came out of cannot save you. So I want you to remember this about these people, because everything he's going to say is based on that. Don't go back to the law. Jesus is here and he is better than and better than and better than. And he's going to keep saying better than sacrificial system, better than those priests, better than the angels, better than. So hold fast, hold fast. So he says in chapter 1, he's superior to the angels and he speaks through his son. So then look at your at a glance chart in chapter 2. It says then to do what? What are we to do?
Listen, pay attention.
Yeah, listen to him. He's speaking. This is how God is speaking to us now. So listen to him. Pay close attention. In chapter 3, he talks about if you hear his voice, don't harden your hearts. Consider Jesus, okay? And when you hear him, don't harden your hearts. These are all the warnings that he's giving them. Chapter 4, he talks about being sure to enter the rest, entering the rest. In chapter 6, what is he telling them to do?
Mature, grow up.
So,
Yes, yes, and that's what we talked about last week. What does that mean? So, all of these exhortations are about encouraging them not to go back to the law. Don't go back to the law. And if you do, that's dead works. Okay. So again, the encouragement is to keep moving, keep growing, keep maturing. Don't just stay with drinking milk, right?
right.
So this is the group of people that we are talking to. We want to talk now about the flow of thought. What's the flow of thought about them from chapter 5, verse 11 through 6:20? So 5:11, you might not have that out, but this lesson started with the end of chapter 5, 11 through 14. And where do we see them at the end of chapter 5?
Jesus, the high priest, after the order of Melchizedek.
Okay, starting with 11. This 11 through 14 is talking about them particularly.
He's
What did you
talking
learn
how
about
they have,
them?
he's talking about how they have not matured. They're dull
Right.
of hearing. They should be teachers, but
Mhm.
they're too immature for that.
Right. And so that takes us into chapter 6, verse 1, when he tells them, therefore, what?
Leave the elementary doctrine and go on to maturity.
Right. So leave all that and go on to maturity. Press on. Don't become sluggish, right? And 6, and then he gives them this example we talked about last week about some who have fallen away from it. And then he says, but that's not you, right? That's not you, because we see your works. And so he says, just press on. Verse 11, what do we desire for you in verse 11 in chapter 6?
Full assurance of hope till the end.
Right, right, full assurance. You have that same earnestness of pressing on to full assurance of hope to the end, right? So what did you learn about hope? What did you learn about hope?
It means confident expectation or anticipation of something, often with a focus on a positive outcome.
Right, right. Expectation of obtaining something. Okay, what is he talking about then? If that's the expectation that you're going to attain, hold on to that hope. What would he be talking about?
That God would keep his promises.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, God would keep his promises.
And the hope of eternal life, I would think.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
Well,
our hope, right?
All of that wrapped up is the hope of Jesus, the hope that
Right.
Jesus brings us.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Jesus is that hope.
Right.
He says
Right,
the
that-
sure and steadfast anchor
Mhm.
that Jesus entered into the behind the curtain, the Holy of Holies,
Right.
as our forerunner on our behalf.
Mhm.
So that the hope is anchored there. It's now and it's eternal.
I like that he used the word anchor.
Mhm.
Anchor. That gives us a picture. Yeah, the anchor. Yeah. So again, and that's for us, that's for them, that's for us. We have that hope. He is our hope. He is the anchor. He has taken that behind the curtain. where the blood is shed for us. So this is the thought process. This is where these people are. And then he uses the example of Abraham in verse 13.
Yeah.
In verse 13.
Yeah.
So why would he use Abraham as an example?
Someone that they would be able to relate to.
A lot of Jews feel that they have nothing to worry about because they are descendants of Abraham.
Yeah. Yeah. They think that's their salvation.
And he
And
wanted
that's
to
the
point,
danger. Yeah.
yeah, he wanted to point to Abraham specifically because of the covenant and God's oath, because God swore by his own self when he cut covenant with Abraham. For him, it was all God. And he's saying here, the author's Paul, I guess, is saying, you know, he's a great example of how God keeps his promises and he'll take you to the end. And he did that through Jesus, his son. So great example in Abraham, but you have to move on from that to even more. Because the hope set before them was rooted in Jesus. To me, it's all back to the first chapter, which has already been mentioned, but we heard from the prophets. Now we hear right from Jesus.
And he's asking them to hold fast to the end, right? Hold fast. And using Abraham. And again, because of who they are, they just came out of living under the law, following all of that. And they would know Abraham. They would know him very well. They would know everything about Abraham. So particularly this group of people would know. So using Abraham as an example is something that they would understand and believe and be able to grasp the truth of. So let's look at Abraham. All of this week that we did, we pretty much know it, but because he's quoting Abraham here, he's using him as an example. And he's quoting from Genesis 22:17 when he says, that surely in verse 13, when God made a promise to Abraham, since he had no one greater by whom to swear, he swore by himself, saying, surely I will bless you and multiply you. And that is a quote from Genesis 22:17, when Abraham was asked to sacrifice Isaac. And we're going to get to that. But before we do, we're going to see what happened in Abraham's life leading up to that point. And then try to understand that big picture and what he's trying to say to these people, which is also what he's trying to say to us. So he says in verse 15, and Abraham, having patiently waited, obtained the promise. Okay, so let's see what we learn about Abraham. Carla has already mentioned some of it, but in Genesis 12, 1 and 3, on page 23 in your study, what do we learn? What are the essential things that we learn about Abraham? The promise.
That God would make him a great nation. When he had no children.
When he had no children, yes. At this point, he has no children.
And was basically beyond the age to have them.
Right.
And I imagine he was pretty secure and comfortable where he was at the time, and yet God told him to pack up and leave. And he that wouldn't have been an easy thing to do. Just leave the country, the land that you've been living in your whole life, and say, okay, let's go on an adventure. But he obeyed, and he did that.
Does anybody have an idea about how old Abraham is at this point?
Be about 85. Oh,
So 75
Yeah,
at
about
least.
85, I'd say.
yeah.
Yeah, 75 for sure,
75.
75.
Okay.
Because moving forward, we see that when Ishmael was born, he was 86,
Ah,
and they had lived in Canaan for 10 years
right.
already. So he was 75 and now asked to make this big move. So again, it's always important to see the age, like we did with Daniel, and we were like so surprised that Daniel was 15 when he was taken, and then when he was thrown into the lion's den, he was like 80 years old. But it just helps us understand and relate better to what's happening. So at this point, Abraham, who is still Abram, is about 75 years old. Okay. So the promise is, because it says that he waited patiently for the promise. So we're looking at what is the promise that God made to him. He will make him a great nation. What else do you see in those 3 verses?
That he will bless those who bless you, and for those who dishonor you, I will curse.
Mhm.
And then you, all the families of the earth, shall be blessed.
Right, right. That's a lot for him to take in at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But this is the foundation of the covenant that God made with Abraham. Genesis 12, 1 through 3. Everything keeps going back to that. And at this point, he still has no children.
Amazing that he believed it, to me.
Yeah.
He believed it all on faith.
Amazing that he believed it.
He did question it.
Well, didn't he and Sarah both laugh about having children?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they laughed. I probably would have too. Yeah, they laughed about it. It's inconceivable what he's saying could happen. So that's 12. Okay, what do we learn that helps us a little bit more understand this promise in Genesis 13, verses 14 to 16?
One thing he told them was to separate from Lot. And I
Okay.
think that probably would have been hard for me to separate from family that I've known basically since he was young. So
What is God giving him in these verses?
He gave him a vision of the land,
Okay, the land.
how
land.
wide and deep it is.
So he's promising him that land, correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Forever.
Bless offspring.
And
Okay.
to the offspring forever. Yeah.
Okay, so this is what we're trying to sort out. He made this covenant with Abraham. He hasn't made the covenant yet, but the promise to Abraham in Genesis 12 for land, for people, and then make him a great nation. And now he's saying, I'm going to give you this land. And he shows him the land. And since Lot is with him, they can't both survive on the same land, so they separate. Okay. And again, part of the promise is, what does he say about the descendants?
They'll be as the dust of the earth.
Okay. And how many does he have now?
None.
0.
Still none. Okay. Still none. So he had to wait. He had to wait for God's promise to be fulfilled. Let's look at chapter 15 of Genesis. 1 through 18. And what do we see in addition to these basic principles of the promise? Now, what do we see?
Well, he tells him that his wife will have a son within the next year. So,
Mhm.
and the stars, if you can number the stars, which is the second time I think that's been used, shall be your offspring. So, and then
Again,
he
when he
had,
has nobody,
right.
he's
So,
talking
and
about how many? Go ahead.
then he had told him all of these sacrifices: a 3-year-old heifer, a female goat, a 3-year-old female goat, a ram, 3 years old, a turtle dove, and a pigeon. And he cut those except for the birds and fell into a deep sleep, and darkness came about them. I thought that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then he speaks about his offspring's what their journey, what their journey will be, which is not what I think even Abraham would have expected. But that for 400 years they shall come, they will be servants in the land for 400 years, and then they will come out with great possessions, and they will come back in the 4th generation. And to your offspring I give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river Euphrates. And then all of the people that they will overcome.
And that is what he's giving Abraham there is a vision of what's going to happen. I mean, more than 400 years from now. Okay.
Right.
More than 400 years. And we know that happened.
We do.
Exactly as he told Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
Let's back up a little bit in that chapter. What caused Abraham to ask God? What did he do? He asked God, how will I know? Okay. How will I know what? Why did God make that covenant with him?
Well, first of all, he didn't have any offspring. So he really wants to know, now you're saying all this, but I ain't got no kids. So,
And what, Yvonne, what was Abraham's proposal?
That he
was going to name Eliezer.
Yeah, Eliezer.
Yeah.
Yes.
He was going to name.
Who was that? Who was Eliezer?
The servant or the main servant.
Yes. Okay. Someone born in his house, right? He was born in his house.
Mm-hmm.
And again, let's talk about why. Why is Abraham saying that?
Because at his age, he had no heir. And Hagar and Ishmael, I believe at this time, had already been gone, or no, not yet. So he was very concerned he had no heir.
Right. And this was, so God had promised him back in Genesis 12, he would have all these heirs. And at this point, he still doesn't have any. So he's thinking, well, how's this going to work then? But here's this servant born in my house. So he's going to be my heir. And that's, I mean, did you find it interesting that he tells God that? This will be my heir. He will be my heir.
Well, he certainly didn't want family to be the heir. He had mentioned a family member, and he did not want him to be an heir. So he was trying to come up with options, which we as human beings do, don't we?
Yeah. And I think too, because we are human, it's logical for us to try to figure out something for God, and he doesn't need our help at all. But I mean, the human side of him was trying to figure this thing out.
Exactly. exactly. Because what? He's been waiting. He's been waiting and still he doesn't see God delivering on his promise.
So then his trust wavers, or Sarah's does.
Okay.
Let's do it another way.
Mm-hmm. Right. And what does God tell him at that point?
No, you're gonna have an heir.
It will be from you. It will be from you and Sarah.
Your body
Right.
and Sarah.
Right. Your body and from Sarah. And then he says, how will I know? How will I know? Well, it should have been enough. And we looked at this last week about the promise, two unchangeable things, right? God made a promise. That should have been enough. That should be enough for any of us. But Abraham says, I don't understand this. How will I know? And so God makes a covenant with him. So the covenant is just absolute confirmation that what God says is true.
I think the difference, though, for us is between us and him is we've got hundreds of years to look back on. Abraham was the first. There was no record prior to Abraham of a man that Abraham could look back at and say, "Oh, I see how God worked here."
Yeah, I'm so glad that we're this many years from Abraham. Yeah.
And those years would have seemed endless, really, as they grew older and older. They would have seemed endless then, and how is ever this going to happen? What I find interesting, and I don't know if anybody else does, is Zechariah, the same thing happened to him. Gabriel came to Zechariah, and he was struck dumb because he didn't believe. I suppose Gabriel would have appeared like a person to him, and he should have believed, whereas God wouldn't have appeared. He would have been a voice, I suppose. But I often think of the two and how differently they were dealt with. Sorry about that.
Yeah. No problem. I'm debating whether to even say, but because I don't see him being struck dumb as punishment.
No.
I see it as a sign.
Okay.
For him to believe. Okay.
Right.
This is now he will know that it's God. Right. And that's kind of what Abraham is asking, how will I know? And so God gives him the covenant and tells him much more than he even wanted to know.
Right.
Much more. So yeah, we can definitely cut Abraham some slack.
Yeah.
This is all new territory.
I think the other thing I note on it is the fact that God knew what Abraham was going to do, and he knew how long it was going to take him to come around, and he still chose him in spite.
Yes, right.
Right. Because he knew his heart.
Yeah. Because from Abraham, the whole nation of Israel comes.
Yeah.
Right. So God was so gracious and gives him the sign of the covenant, because Abraham is like, well, we'll just have Eliezer do it, and then you have the birth of Ishmael from Hagar. Okay. Well, maybe that can work, but no. Then, and that brings us to Genesis 17. And what do we learn about this whole Abraham story in chapter 17.
I'm not sure, but I think, especially, I guess Sarah thought she was doing the right thing, but you're always gonna wind up in trouble when you try to help God out with what he's doing. So, but then it's funny how it works right into God's plan anyway. Even though when we do some things that's not right, the plan of God is still gonna work out.
Yeah.
It may take us longer to get there, and they went right around the hedges and bushes when if they had to just wait, God promised they were going to have a son, but they just had to see it in their eyes, I guess. And that's yeah. And then the fact that Sarah gets angry at Hagar, it's funny how God does things.
I suppose it would have been easier if they were about 40.
Yeah.
But when you're that old and it's not happening, then it must be difficult. Yeah.
I think too that this really shows God's patience. I mean, when you think about it, God told him what's going to happen, but here then, Sarah gives advice of how to, that they should handle it and kind of like helping God out, making it happen. But then God is patient, and then here in Genesis 17, he calmly tells Abraham, I'm going to bless Sarah. I'm going to give you a son by her. I told you that before. This is what I'm going to do. So, yeah, I thought God is very patient with us.
And I think in spite of his questions, he was still credited as being righteous. His belief was credited as being righteous. That's back in Genesis 15, that he believed God and God credited it to him as being righteous in spite of his questions and his plan B that he's going to help out.
He did. His faith was there right then. He believed it. Okay, so then let me just say, what does that say about our faith journey?
We got to hold fast to what we believe in. I mean, you can't waver. You have to believe it with all your heart. And you may not know how it's going to work out or what the outcome will be, but you got to believe that God is going to work it out for you.
And it was that belief that was credited to Abraham, as righteousness. Wasn't what he did, it's the fact that he had faith and believed.
Right, not by works. It was by faith. How soon is Sarah going to have this child now?
It is within a year. By this time
Okay.
next year.
Okay. And so how old is Abraham now?
It said he was
100.
100, I guess.
Okay, 100.
Yeah.
And
Sarah was
so
90.
let's do the math. When did he start this journey back in Genesis 12? Remember how old he said he was?
75.
75. Yeah.
75. So 25 years he's been waiting.
Wow. It's a lot of time.
It is a lot of time.
To us.
It is. Mhm. Yeah. And during that time, what have we seen about Abraham?
He's still faithful. He's still faithful. All those years, he's still faithful. He may, he's our example of being faithful. Regardless of what happened, and even with the testing, God testing him with his son, he was willing to do whatever. If God told him to do it, he just believed that I don't know what's gonna happen, but maybe he's gonna take care of it. You know, he has some faith. I'm telling you, powerful faith.
I agree.
So let's, he's waited 25 years. He's about to get this promised child, okay? And Isaac is born. And the promise has arrived, okay? Through Isaac. Now he has a son. Now he can see the fulfillment that can happen. Will make you a great nation. I will get your seed, your descendants will be as the stars of the sky. So here's the beginning of it. And now we come to chapter 22. What do we learn in chapter 22 that's happening in the life of Abraham?
That this, go ahead.
Sacrifice of Isaac.
Mm-hmm.
The sacrifice of Isaac. Anybody want to elaborate on that a little?
Well, God asked Abraham to sacrifice Isaac in a specific place.
Okay.
And without a doubt, he packs everything up and they head off. And on the third day, he stops and he and the boy go on. But he said to those individuals, wait, I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. So he went on, he built the altar, laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac and laid him on the altar. And then in verse 10, he has the knife in hand. In verse 11, the angel of the Lord calls out, Abraham, Abraham, and tells him not to harm the child.
Okay, so let's talk about Isaac. Let's talk about this request, this test. It's a test. God says that right in the beginning of that chapter. It's a test of his faith at this point. So now he's given him a son, and now he's asking him to sacrifice that son.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we thinking? What is Abraham thinking? What could he be thinking? What might he be thinking?
God will provide.
I think he really believed God was going to provide it.
Yeah. And I just think it was amazing that several times God will provide was there. And I think he might have been shocked at first, but he didn't hesitate. He did what he was asked to do.
And I thought he thought that God might raise him from the dead.
Yes.
Yeah, that thought crossed my mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a revelation about this today, and it felt kind of silly when I was thinking about it. But so I thought, man, this man has just a faith that I cannot necessarily grasp. And then on the other hand, like listening to it, I just feel like there was always this part in my brain that I was like, man, he's a little crazy. Like this man is a little bit crazy. But looking at everything this week, God had made a covenant with him. He had laid him down. He had done all of the weird things for the covenant to happen. And it wasn't that he just had faith. He knew that God couldn't lie, and he knew that God had not fulfilled the covenant because his descendants did not number the stars. At that point, he had Isaac and Ishmael. That's it. Like the covenant wasn't fulfilled. And it wasn't just that he had faith. He knew that God had made this promise and it wasn't fulfilled. I mean, yes, that is faith. But I mean, it felt like a very big revelation to me today that all of a sudden it wasn't that this man just had astronomical faith, is that he trusted that God had made this covenant and he knew it wasn't fulfilled yet.
And the only fulfillment would be
Yeah.
coming through his and Sarah's son, which is what the Lord had spoken plus years before.
Yeah.
N-
Yeah,
Not,
I love that covenant. I love that revelation, Courtney, because it has to tie back to the covenant.
yeah.
In fact, the writer of Hebrews says that two unchangeable things: his promise to Abraham and his covenant.
Covenant.
His covenant with Abraham. So you're right. And the covenant, and he said it would come through Isaac. And if you kill your only son, that the covenant's coming through, then you got nothing. But God made the covenant that he would have the land and the people.
And I think that it's this big picture. Like I always thought, oh, like, look at this amazing story because he provided the ram. But now it feels bigger than that. Like it isn't just that God provided. He did provide. He always does. But it's that he made this covenant and he's going to fulfill it. The way he's fulfilling it in this moment is that he provided the ram.
Right.
Yeah.
And not only that, I was thinking, I read this story several times, and I was trying to get in my head. Abraham is doing all this, but his son Isaac was not a little boy. So I'm thinking, in my mind, I'm trying to figure out, well, what was the son doing? What was his reaction to him seeing his father go through all this? He's laid him on the wood and all this. But I'm wondering, did he say anything? Did he question his? And then I thought, well, he had just as much faith as his father. You got going through all that? Well, I don't know.
I like the progression it shows of Abraham's faith. God told him he would have a son at the age of 100. He chuckled and said, well, we'll see. But now God told him to kill the son 8 years later. I think it's about 8. The kid's 8 years old about, I thought.
7 or 8, yeah.
And he didn't question it. He just went and did it.
Right.
And that's a lot bigger belief to say, oh, I'm going to kill my only son
Amen.
versus I'll have a son. I mean, which one would you have an easier time trusting and believing in?
Wow. Mm.
And he said to the men that were with him, he said, we will go over and we will worship.
Right.
And we'll be back.
And we'll be back. It was an act of worship.
Mm-hmm.
How Abraham saw it, worshiping the God that he believes in. And you looked at a couple of cross references that helps us to maybe understand what Abraham was thinking. On page 25 from Romans and Hebrews 11.
Yeah.
What do we learn there that might be helpful in understanding what Abraham might have been thinking when he took Isaac to sacrifice him?
It was credited to him. What is that? Was that in Romans?
Yes, it was Romans.
Yeah, credited to him as righteousness.
Find what does it say in Romans about Sarah's body and Abraham's body?
Well, Abraham was all but dead, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere I read he didn't weaken in faith when he thought about how old he was.
Right. It's like, this doesn't make sense, but God brought life out of our bodies, out of our dead bodies, dead bodies. And certainly he could bring life to Isaac.
And that portion of scripture ends by saying, being fully persuaded that God had power to do what he had promised.
Mhm. That's awesome, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Fully persuaded that God has the power to do what he has promised. We could put that on a plaque and hang it in our walls, right? Yeah.
If
I
God had,
didn't really,
I would
yeah.
say if God had provided him Isaac in his 30s, he might not have felt the same. You know, the fact that if it hadn't been for that miracle, he may not have been quite as, you know, but if that was such a miraculous thing, it wasn't so hard to believe that God would also spare Isaac. And even if he didn't, you know, it's like you said, even if he had followed through with it, God somehow would, you know, he had enough faith to believe, okay, he'll raise him from the dead then. That takes a lot of faith.
Yeah.
Hmm? But God has the power to do what he made a covenant to do.
Amen.
So this illustration, Hebrews, the writer of Hebrews was giving it to these Jewish believers who are kind of wavering. So how is this going to help them to hold fast their hope until the end?
It's a strong reminder that God follows through on his promises, and you can patiently wait, just as Abraham did, because he will do what he said he'll do.
And here's an example of how
Mhm.
God follows through with his promises.
Yeah, and it's not just any example. The example that's chosen here is the father of the Israelite nation, which
Mhm.
and so they can't look at it and say, well, that just was true for him, but they wouldn't have existed. They wouldn't be having this conversation,
Right.
for the fact that God kept his promises throughout all of this.
Absolutely. So this is like the biggest example that could be given to them, I think, you know, and because it's so miraculous on many levels. God did this, he said he would do it, and he did it. And out of Abraham came the whole nation of Israel. So you can hold on to that. You can hold fast to that. This is true. God kept his promise, the covenant. And we are in covenant with Jesus. We are. That's a covenant. That's a blood covenant. When we accept that he walked through the pieces and made that covenant of blood with us, and that covenant is fulfilled, will be fulfilled. So hold on to that. Keep growing forward. Keep maturing in it. Keep eating the food of the word. Keep growing. And keep your hope strong, because it's there. It will happen. It will happen. Yeah, I love how you tied this to the covenant. Like that's where his faith was, way back in that covenant, when he said, how will I know? And God made that covenant. 1 second. Okay, I thought I was going to sneeze, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, anything else? Any observations about this? How does this affect us?
I thought it was personally, I thought it was it's a good story to let me know that no matter what I go through in life, you know, God he can't lie. So when I kind of waver with my faith, I can look at this lesson and say, well, look, God is not going to change who he is or what he said he's going to do, but I have to be patient. And I just got to hold on to faith and believe that he's going to do what he said it would do. Even if I can't see it. And sometimes I think that's what I want to see, the results. I don't want to wait a long time, but then I believe that God is no short of his word and he's going to do exactly what he said he's going to do.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah.
Yes, well said. Even if I can't see it, I have to be patient and believe that God is going to, because he can't lie.
And sometimes I only want to wait a day or two, not 25 years.
Yeah.
That long, huh? A day
It's
or
enough.
two. That's, yeah. Right. Right. And you think about, think about some of the things that you're waiting for God to do.
Mhm.
And how long have you been waiting?
Yeah.
Well, it's more than a day or two, but that's okay. Just keep that hope till the end.
Hang in there, as you say.
Right. So this,
And the longer you live, I think the more you see that happening in your own life. And if you look back, you can see how God was working all the time.
absolutely. I'm sure we each would have a story to tell of that kind of faith. And waiting patiently for the promises.
And I think too that Paul was speaking to these immature Christians, and he was encouraging them that they too might achieve the kind of faith that Abraham had if they continue and they continue to grow.
He said, be imitators of those. He gave the illustration of Abraham. Be imitators of Abraham. So we can all be imitators of Abraham. I think it's powerful. And Nancy, can you remind me, Nancy Mowers, of that statement about God having the power to do what he promised?
Being fully persuaded that God had power to do what he had promised.
Okay, what
from
verse is that?
Romans 4:21.
Romans 4:21. Okay, 4:21. So we'll take that for this week. God has the power to do what he has promised. And because of his covenant, it will happen. The promise is good enough, but he covenanted too, to make it more certain. Okay, be Abraham's this week. Remember Abraham and his faith and patience. Even if we can't see it, God is working and he will provide because of his covenant with us.